In the 1930s, grandmas made 10-minute meals that mattered. Their quick cooking didn't just fill plates, it turned simple pantry staples into hot suppers. These 30 forgotten meals might sound impossible today, but they kept families fed during the Depression era. Let's discover 30 genius meals that show how grandmas made magic without fancy ingredients. Sick day toast became the ultimate comfort meal when Grandma needed something gentle yet nourishing for family members feeling under the weather. She warmed whole milk in a saucepan with a spoonful of sugar and pinch of salt until steaming but not boiling. Meanwhile, she lightly toasted white bread until just warm and golden, then placed it in a shallow bowl. She poured the hot sweetened milk generously over the toast, letting it soak until soft and spoonable, then dotted the top with butter that melted into golden pools. The bread absorbed the warm milk within seconds, becoming incredibly tender and easy to eat without any chewing effort. Each spoonful was warm, comforting, and soothing, with gentle sweetness that made it appealing even when appetites were poor. This became the go-to meal for upset stomachs, sore throats, or anyone too tired to eat regular food, proving that the simplest combinations could provide the most comfort when someone needed gentle care and nourishment during difficult times. Goldenrod eggs transformed simple hard-boiled eggs into something special when Grandma wanted breakfast that looked fancy but cost pennies. She hard-boiled eggs for 7 minutes, then plunged them into cold water before peeling. She separated the yolks from the whites, chopping the whites finely while setting yolks aside. In a small saucepan, she made quick cream sauce by melting butter, whisking in flour, then gradually adding milk until smooth and thick. The chopped egg whites folded into this cream sauce, creating rich, chunky mixture. She ladled this generously over toasted bread on plates, then crumbled the bright yellow yolks over the top like golden snow. The name came from this beautiful presentation. The yellow yolks resembled goldenrod flowers blooming across white cream. Each forkful combined creamy sauce, tender egg whites, and rich yolk crumbles with soft toast underneath. This elevated humble eggs into something that felt special enough for Sunday breakfast, while using ingredients every household kept on hand during hard times. Before we move on, many of you asked in the comments where to find these recipes. We even received tons of email too, so we published these recipes on our website. The link is in the description. Let's continue. Hobo breakfast got its name from railroad workers who needed fast, filling meals before catching trains for work. Grandma heated a skillet with bacon grease or butter until sizzling, then cracked an egg directly into the hot pan. She fried it quickly, about 2 minutes, until the whites set, but the yolk remained soft and runny. Meanwhile, she toasted 2 slices of bread until golden brown and warm. She placed the hot fried egg between the bread slices, creating a sandwich that was portable and easy to eat with hands. The runny yolk soaked into the bread when bitten, adding richness and moisture that made every bite satisfying. Salt and pepper added all the seasoning needed. This simple sandwich provided complete protein and energy for long workdays, and it could be wrapped and carried in a pocket or lunch pail. The genius was its speed and portability, ready in 5 minutes, eaten in 2, and substantial enough to keep hunger away for hours during the Depression, when meals were scarce. Before we move, Clara's special honored Clara Canucciari, who survived the Depression and later taught millions this economical meal through her famous cooking videos. Grandma peeled and sliced potatoes thin, then diced an onion and cut hot dogs into rounds. She heated oil in a large skillet until shimmering, then added the potatoes and onions, frying them together until the potatoes turned golden brown and crispy on the edges, about 8 minutes of patient stirring. The onions softened and sweetened, adding wonderful flavor. In the final 2 minutes, she added the hot dog slices, letting them heat through and brown slightly. Everything got seasoned with salt and pepper, and sometimes she added a spoonful of tomato sauce for color and tang. The finished dish was hearty and filling, with crispy potatoes, sweet onions, and savory hot dogs all mixed together. This one-skillet meal fed entire families for pennies, required no oven, and used ingredients that kept well without refrigeration. It proved that with creativity, simple pantry staples could become satisfying suppers that everyone actually wanted to eat. Poverty pudding was the fastest meal Grandma made when absolutely nothing else was available and hunger couldn't wait. She tore stale bread into bite-sized pieces and placed them in a bowl. She poured cold milk over the bread until it was completely covered, and then sprinkled sugar generously on top, sometimes adding a shake of cinnamon if she had it. The bread soaked up the milk quickly, becoming soft and pudding-like within a minute. Some families ate this cold, others warmed it briefly on the stove, stirring until it became thick porridge. The sweetness made it appealing to children who might refuse plain bread and milk. Despite its humble name, this provided carbohydrates, protein, and calcium in a form that was easy to prepare and digest. Grandma often made this for late-night snacks or when unexpected guests arrived and the cupboards were bare. It proved that even when resources were desperately low, something filling and slightly sweet could be created from bread that was too stale to eat plain and milk that needed using. These 5 genius meals show how grandmas turned simple ingredients into hot suppers in under 10 minutes. From sick-day comfort to skillet dinners, each recipe fed families when time and money were scarce. Simple cooking, smart shortcuts, and meals ready before hunger turned to panic. Let's discover 5 more quick classics. French toast, Depression style. Stripped away any fancy ingredients to create filling breakfast using only what every household kept on hand. Grandma beat 1 egg with a splash of milk and pinch of salt in a shallow bowl. No vanilla, no cinnamon, no sugar added to the mixture since those were luxuries. She heated a skillet with a thin layer of bacon grease or butter until hot. She dipped stale bread slices quickly into the egg mixture, coating both sides, and then placed them in the hot pan. They fried for about 2 minutes per side until golden brown and cooked through. The egg created a slightly crispy coating while the bread interior stayed soft. She served them hot with whatever sweetener was available, usually just a sprinkle of sugar, sometimes molasses or corn syrup if they had it. This transformed stale bread that would otherwise be thrown away into something filling and satisfying. The egg coating added protein, making it more substantial than plain toast. Families appreciated how it made old bread taste fresh again. Invalid supper got its old-fashioned name from being served to sick people or invalids who needed gentle, easy-to-digest food. Grandma warmed milk in a saucepan until steaming, adding a spoonful of sugar for sweetness and energy. She placed several saltine crackers in a bowl, then poured the hot milk over them until they were completely covered and floating. The crackers softened quickly, becoming tender and spoonable within a minute. She sometimes added a pat of butter on top that melted into the warm milk. This was served immediately while still hot, eaten with a spoon like soup. The combination was bland and soothing, perfect for upset stomachs or anyone recovering from illness who couldn't handle stronger flavors or textures. The crackers provided starch for energy, and the milk offered protein and calcium in easily digestible form. Despite its simple nature, this provided real nourishment when nothing else would stay down. It proved that sometimes the gentlest foods were exactly what sick bodies needed most during recovery. Italian scramble brought Mediterranean flavors to depression tables when Grandma wanted something different from plain eggs. She sliced bell peppers thin and diced an onion, then heated olive oil or bacon grease in a skillet until shimmering. The vegetables went in first, frying for about 5 minutes until the peppers softened and the onions turned translucent and sweet. She cracked eggs directly into the pan with the vegetables, then scrambled everything together until the eggs were cooked through but still moist. Salt and pepper seasoned the mixture perfectly. The peppers added color and slight sweetness, while the onions contributed savory depth. This turned simple scrambled eggs into something that felt more like a complete meal rather than just breakfast. She served it with bread for dipping into any remaining egg, or with leftover pasta if they had it. This showed Italian-American ingenuity during hard times, using vegetables from backyard gardens to stretch expensive eggs further and add nutrition. The bright colors made it visually appealing, which mattered when morale was low and food needed to look appetizing. Fried scrapple used leftover cornmeal mush that had been cooked earlier and allowed to firm up overnight in a loaf pan. Grandma sliced the cold, firm cornmeal into half-inch thick slabs, creating pieces that would hold together during frying. She heated oil or bacon grease in a skillet until hot, then laid the cornmeal slices carefully in the pan. They fried for about 3 to 4 minutes per side until a golden brown crust formed and the edges became crispy. The interior stayed soft and creamy, while the outside developed wonderful texture. She served these hot, sometimes with a drizzle of molasses or maple syrup for sweetness, other times with eggs for a savory breakfast. The crispy, creamy contrast made it far more interesting than plain cornmeal mush. This was genius because it transformed an inexpensive grain into something that felt substantial and satisfying. Families often made a large pot of cornmeal mush, ate some fresh, then fried the leftovers for several days of meals from one batch of cooking. Toad in the Hole delighted children with its whimsical name and fun presentation during breakfast time. Grandma used a drinking glass to cut a circular hole in the center of a bread slice, creating a frame with a round opening. She heated butter or bacon grease in a skillet until melted and hot, then placed the bread frame in the pan. Immediately, she cracked an egg into the hole, letting it cook right there in the bread's center. The bread toasted on the bottom, while the egg white spread slightly and cooked, with the yolk sitting perfectly in the middle like a golden eye. After about 3 minutes, she carefully flipped the whole thing to cook the other side briefly. The result was bread and egg cooked together with the crispy toast frame surrounding the fried egg. The name made children smile, and they loved how the egg was captured inside the bread. This turned ordinary fried eggs and toast into something special that used the exact same ingredients but felt like a treat. These 10 quick meals prove Grandma's mastered fast cooking that saved both time and money. From French toast to Toad in the Hole, each recipe delivered filling food in under 10 minutes using pantry basics. No wasted ingredients, no wasted time, just smart solutions for hungry families. Penny butter toast became the ultimate quick treat when Grandma needed something sweet that cost almost nothing and took less time than brewing tea. She toasted white bread slices until warm and lightly golden, then spread them thickly with soft butter while still hot so it melted into every pore of the bread. She sprinkled white or brown sugar generously across the buttered surface, sometimes adding a light dusting of cinnamon if the spice tin wasn't empty. The sugar began melting slightly into the warm butter, creating a sweet glaze that glistened on top. Children loved this because it tasted like dessert, but appeared at breakfast or after school as a special snack. The name came from its incredibly low cost. Each serving cost about 1 penny, making it affordable even during the hardest weeks. Grandma often made several slices at once, wrapping them in wax paper for school lunches or afternoon treats. The combination of creamy butter and sweet sugar on warm toast satisfied sweet cravings without requiring eggs, milk, or any baking. This proved that three basic ingredients everyone kept in the pantry could create something that felt indulgent and brought smiles to children's faces even when money was desperately tight, and treats were rare luxuries most families couldn't afford regularly during the Depression years. Slumgullion stew got its funny name from old slang, meaning mixed-up cheap food, but families loved it because it turned odds and ends into hot supper fast. Grandma started by browning whatever leftover cooked meat she had, a few spoonfuls of ground beef, diced ham, or shredded chicken, in a hot skillet with chopped onion and garlic if available. She added a can of diced tomatoes with all their juice, then stirred in cooked macaroni or leftover boiled potatoes and any vegetables sitting in the pantry, canned corn, green beans, or diced carrots. Everything simmered together for just 5 minutes, long enough for flavors to blend and the tomato liquid to thicken slightly into sauce. She seasoned it with salt, pepper, and a pinch of dried herbs, usually oregano or basil, that gave it hearty, savory flavor. The finished stew was thick and satisfying, tasting like it had been cooking all afternoon, even though it took only 10 minutes start to finish. This was genius because Grandma could adjust the recipe based on whatever leftovers needed using, meaning nothing went to waste, and every pot tasted slightly different. It fed entire families for pennies, required only one pot for easy cleanup, and proved that resourceful cooking could turn scattered leftovers into complete meals everyone actually wanted to eat. Workman's sandwich earned its name by fueling hard-working men through long factory or farm shifts with portable protein that cost pennies. Grandma spread 2 thick slices of homemade white bread generously with butter or lard to keep them from drying out during the workday. She layered thin slices of fried bologna and leftover meatloaf or canned Spam on the bread, adding a spoonful of sweet pickle relish or yellow mustard if the budget allowed it that week. The key was making it portable and substantial. She wrapped each sandwich tightly in wax paper or a clean cloth napkin so it could be tucked into a lunch pail and eaten hours later without getting soggy or falling apart. The fried meat stayed moist inside the bread, and the butter prevented everything from drying out by midday. Some grandmas fried the entire assembled sandwich in a hot skillet for 1 minute per side, creating a crispy golden exterior with a warm, savory interior that felt more substantial. This quick pan fry added extra flavor and made the sandwich stay warm longer. But men appreciated how this simple sandwich provided enough energy to work through afternoon without their stomachs growling, proving that basic ingredients and smart assembly could sustain families through the Depression's toughest days when every penny and calorie mattered. Garden Scramble showcased how Grandma used backyard vegetables to stretch expensive eggs further while adding nutrition and color to breakfast plates. She heated a tablespoon of bacon grease or butter in a large skillet until shimmering, then added finely diced onion, diced bell pepper, and chopped fresh tomato from the garden. She cooked these vegetables over medium-high heat for about 3 minutes, just until the onion softened and released its sweetness, and the tomato broke down into juicy pieces. Next, she cracked 4 to 6 eggs directly into the skillet with the vegetables, breaking the yolks and stirring everything together until the eggs scrambled into soft curds mixed throughout the colorful vegetables. She seasoned the scramble with salt, pepper, and sometimes a pinch of dried basil or oregano for extra flavor. The result was bright and savory, looking and tasting like a complete meal, even though it cost only pennies per serving. Garden Scramble was popular because it used fresh vegetables families grew themselves, reducing grocery costs to almost nothing while adding vitamins. Grandma served it for breakfast, lunch, or supper, often with a slice of toasted bread or a handful of leftover boiled potatoes on the side. Emergency fritters got their name because Grandma could make them in under 10 minutes when unexpected guests arrived or when the family needed hot food immediately. The batter started with leftover mashed potatoes, usually about 1 cup, mixed with a beaten egg, a tablespoon of flour, and a pinch of salt to hold everything together. Grandma stirred in any available vegetables, finely chopped onion, grated carrot, or leftover cooked corn, creating a thick, chunky mixture in less than 1 minute. She heated a shallow layer of bacon grease or lard in a cast-iron skillet over medium-high heat until it shimmered. She dropped heaping spoonfuls of the batter into the hot fat, pressing each mound flat with the back of the spoon to form thin, even cakes that would cook through quickly. The fritters fried for about 3 minutes per side, developing a golden, crispy crust, while staying soft and savory inside with little pockets of vegetables throughout. She served them hot, sometimes with a dollop of ketchup or alongside fried eggs for a complete meal that felt freshly cooked rather than thrown together from leftovers. This was brilliant because it transformed cold mashed potatoes that nobody wanted to eat plain into something that tasted special and satisfied hunger fast during the Depression when creativity mattered as much as ingredients. These 15 quick meals show how Depression-era grandmas turned simple pantry staples into hot suppers that fed families in under 10 minutes. From sweet toast to savory fritters, each recipe proved that love and resourcefulness mattered more than fancy ingredients or long cooking times. Sailor's supper combined canned beans and sliced hot dogs, 2 shelf-stable proteins that families could afford and store without refrigeration during the Depression. Grandma started by slicing 4 or 5 hot dogs into thin rounds, then frying them in a hot skillet with a teaspoon of bacon grease or butter until the edges turned slightly crispy and browned, releasing their salty, smoky flavor into the pan. Next, she opened a can of pork and beans and poured the entire contents, beans and thick tomato sauce, directly into the skillet with the hot dogs. She stirred everything together and let it simmer for about 3 minutes until heated through and bubbling. The beans absorbed the hot dog flavor while the tomato sauce thickened slightly, creating a hearty, savory mixture. She seasoned it with a pinch of black pepper and sometimes a drop of Worcestershire sauce if available. This one-skillet meal fed entire families for pennies, required no oven or special equipment, and used ingredients that kept for months in the pantry. Grandma served it in bowls with a slice of bread for dipping into the sauce. The name came from sailors who ate similar simple bean dishes on ships during long voyages. It proved that 2 canned ingredients could become satisfying supper in 10 minutes flat during hard times when fresh food was expensive. Biscuit gravy transformed leftover biscuits into filling breakfast when Grandma needed something hot and hearty that would stick to everyone's ribs until lunch. She started by making simple flour gravy, melting a tablespoon of bacon grease in a skillet, whisking in 2 tablespoons of flour to make a roux, then gradually adding milk while stirring constantly until the mixture thickened into smooth, creamy gravy. She seasoned it generously with salt and plenty of black pepper, sometimes adding crumbled cooked sausage if any was available that morning. Meanwhile, she split leftover biscuits in half and placed them cut side up on plates. She ladled the hot, thick gravy generously over the biscuits, covering them completely so the gravy soaked into the bread and pooled around the edges on the plate. The biscuits absorbed the creamy gravy within seconds, becoming soft and rich with every bite. Each forkful combined tender bread with savory, peppery sauce that was filling and satisfying enough to fuel hard work. This was genius because it used biscuits that were a day old and starting to dry out, turning them into something people actually wanted to eat rather than throwing them away. The gravy added protein from milk and fat from bacon grease, making it more substantial than plain biscuits alone during Depression years. Vinegar slaw plate brought fresh crunch to Depression tables when Grandma needed a meal that required no cooking and used vegetables from the backyard garden. She shredded half a head of cabbage thin using a knife or grater, creating ribbons that would absorb dressing quickly without needing to sit overnight. In a bowl, she whisked together 2 tablespoons of vinegar, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and a pinch of salt until the sugar dissolved completely, creating a sweet-sour dressing that was tangy and bright. She poured this over the shredded cabbage and tossed everything together with her hands, then let it sit for just a minute while the cabbage softened slightly and absorbed the flavors. She piled this slaw on plates alongside sliced hard-boiled eggs, a few saltine crackers, and maybe a slice of cheese if available, creating a complete cold meal. The vinegar slaw was refreshing and crunchy, the eggs provided protein, and the crackers added starch for energy. This proved that not every meal needed to be hot to be satisfying, especially during summer when heating the kitchen was uncomfortable. Grandma could prepare this entire plate in under 10 minutes, and it used ingredients that cost almost nothing, yet provided balanced nutrition when food budgets were desperately tight during the Depression. Quick rice pudding used leftover cooked rice to create something sweet that felt like dessert, but could be eaten for breakfast or supper. Grandma combined about 2 cups of cold leftover rice with 2 cups of milk in a saucepan, stirring them together over medium heat. She added 3 tablespoons of sugar, a pinch of salt, and a beaten egg, whisking constantly to prevent the egg from scrambling into chunks. The mixture heated and thickened within about 5 minutes as the rice absorbed the sweetened milk, and the egg created a light custard that bound everything together. She stirred in a splash of vanilla extract if she had it, and a handful of raisins for sweetness and texture, then removed the pot from heat. The pudding was creamy and sweet, with tender rice grains suspended throughout the custard. She served it warm in bowls, sometimes with a sprinkle of cinnamon on top for extra flavor. This transformed plain leftover rice that nobody wanted to eat cold into something comforting and satisfying that children actually requested for meals. It proved that with milk, sugar, and egg, Grandma could turn any leftover starch into something that felt special and sweet during times when treats were rare, luxuries families couldn't usually afford. Fried mush cakes used cold, leftover cornmeal mush that had set firm overnight, turning it into crispy breakfast cakes that everyone loved. Grandma sliced the solid cornmeal loaf into half-inch thick slabs, creating pieces sturdy enough to hold together during frying without falling apart. She heated bacon grease or butter in a cast-iron skillet until shimmering hot, then laid the cornmeal slices carefully in the pan without crowding them so each piece would develop a proper crust. They fried for about 4 minutes per side until a deep golden brown crust formed and the edges became wonderfully crispy and crunchy. The interior stayed soft and creamy, creating a perfect crispy, creamy contrast in every bite. She served these hot, drizzled with molasses, maple syrup, or just sprinkled with sugar, depending on what sweetener was available that week. Sometimes she served them alongside fried eggs for a savory breakfast instead of sweet. This was brilliant because it transformed an inexpensive grain into something substantial that felt like a proper meal rather than just cheap filler. Families often made a large pot of cornmeal mush, ate some fresh, then fried the leftovers for several days of breakfasts from one batch of cooking, proving that planning ahead could stretch food budgets. These 20 genius meals prove grandmas knew how to feed families fast without wasting time, money, or ingredients. From penny butter toast to fried mush cakes, each dish was ready in under 10 minutes and cost pennies per serving, showing that smart shortcuts and resourceful cooking kept everyone fed when it mattered most. Creamed chipped beef became a depression staple when Grandma needed to stretch expensive meat into a filling meal that fed the whole family for pennies and made everyone feel satisfied despite hard times. She started with dried beef, usually a small jar of thin-sliced salted beef that cost very little and kept for weeks without refrigeration in the pantry, making it perfect for families who couldn't afford fresh meat regularly. She tore the beef into small pieces and rinsed it briefly under cold water to remove excess salt that would otherwise make the dish too salty to eat comfortably, though some families skipped this step to save time. In a saucepan, she melted 2 tablespoons of butter over medium heat, then whisked in 2 tablespoons of flour to create a roux, stirring constantly for about a minute until it turned light golden and smelled nutty and toasted. She gradually added 2 cups of milk while stirring constantly to prevent lumps from forming in the mixture, and the sauce thickened into smooth, creamy white gravy within about 3 minutes of steady whisking. She folded the torn beef pieces into this thick cream sauce and let everything heat through for another 3 minutes, stirring occasionally to make sure the beef was evenly distributed and heated completely. The result was rich, savory, and deeply satisfying, with bits of salty beef throughout the creamy sauce that coated every piece and made each bite flavorful. Grandma ladled this generously over toasted bread slices that had been placed on plates, creating what families affectionately called SOS, or creamed beef on toast, a nickname that stuck throughout the Depression years. The cream sauce made a small amount of meat stretch to feed 6 people easily, and the dish was filling enough to keep hunger away for hours, despite using only a few ounces of actual beef in the entire recipe. This proved that with clever cooking techniques and smart use of flour and milk, expensive ingredients could be stretched far beyond what anyone thought possible during times when meat was too expensive for most families to afford, regularly or even weekly. The warm, comforting dish became a breakfast favorite that used ingredients every household kept on hand. Dried beef lasted months, flour and milk were staples, and butter could be substituted with lard if necessary. It could be prepared start to finish in under 10 minutes, making it perfect for busy mornings when Grandma needed to get everyone fed and out the door quickly for work or school, without spending much time cooking or using fuel to keep the stove going longer than absolutely necessary during Depression years. Fried egg sandwich. Deluxe elevated the basic egg sandwich by adding 1 or 2 extra ingredients that made it feel special and restaurant quality without costing much more than the plain version families ate daily. Grandma heated bacon grease in a cast-iron skillet over medium heat and fried an egg until the white set completely, but the yolk stayed runny and soft in the center, which took about 3 minutes of careful watching. Meanwhile, she toasted 2 slices of white bread until golden and warm, filling the kitchen with that comforting smell of toasted bread that made everyone's mouth water immediately. She spread 1 slice with a thin layer of mayonnaise if she had it in the icebox, or butter if she didn't, then placed the hot fried egg carefully on top so the yolk wouldn't break and run everywhere before the sandwich was assembled. If there was a slice of cheese in the icebox, usually American or cheddar, she laid it over the hot egg so it would melt slightly from the heat and become creamy and gooey. Sometimes she added a thin slice of tomato from the garden during summer months, when tomatoes were abundant and cost nothing, or a leaf of lettuce if any was available that day in the icebox. She topped it with the second slice of toast and pressed down gently. creating a sandwich that was portable and easy to eat with hands without everything falling apart or the yolk running down someone's chin. The runny yolk acted as built-in sauce when the sandwich was bitten into, soaking into the bread and making every bite moist and flavorful without needing extra condiments or spreads. This sandwich provided complete protein from the egg, and the small additions, cheese, tomato, mayo, made it feel like a restaurant meal rather than depression food thrown together from scraps and leftovers. Men carried these sandwiches to work wrapped tightly in wax paper, and they stayed fresh for hours without getting soggy because the bread absorbed the yolk gradually as the morning went on. Children loved them for lunch because they felt special and delicious compared to plain egg sandwiches their classmates ate, and giving them something to look forward to during the school day. This proved that tiny upgrades costing just pennies, a slice of cheese, a smear of mayonnaise, a tomato slice from the garden, could transform ordinary everyday meals into something families looked forward to eating and enjoyed thoroughly, bringing small moments of joy and satisfaction during hard times when treats were rare, money was always tight, and every meal needed to count as both nutrition and morale boost for families struggling through depression years. Potato soup. Quick version became a lifesaver when Grandma needed hot, filling food fast and had almost nothing in the pantry except potatoes and milk, which were staples every household kept. She peeled and diced 3 or 4 medium potatoes into small cubes. The smaller the pieces, the faster they cooked, and the sooner everyone could eat. She put them in a pot with just enough water to cover them completely, added a generous pinch of salt, and boiled them over high heat for about 7 minutes until they were fork tender and starting to fall apart when poked. Instead of draining all the starchy cooking water like some recipes required, she mashed about half the potatoes right in the pot with a fork or potato masher, leaving some chunks for texture and interest, while the mashed portions thickened the liquid into creamy base that made the soup rich. She added about 2 cups of milk and a tablespoon of butter, stirring everything together over low heat until it was hot and steaming but not boiling, which would have made the milk curdle and ruin the soup's smooth texture. She seasoned it with more salt to taste, plenty of black pepper for warmth and flavor, and sometimes a pinch of dried parsley or chives if the herb jar wasn't empty that week. The finished soup was thick, creamy, and deeply comforting, with chunks of tender potato throughout the smooth base that made every spoonful satisfying and filling. Grandma served it in bowls with a few crackers on the side for dipping and adding crunch, or sometimes with a slice of bread and butter for a more substantial meal. This soup proved that potatoes, which cost almost nothing, and every family either grew in their backyard or could afford to buy, could become a complete meal that warmed everyone up from the inside and filled hungry stomachs for hours without needing meat or expensive vegetables. The entire process took under 10 minutes from start to finish, making it perfect for days when there was no time to cook properly, but everyone needed something hot and substantial quickly. Children loved the creamy texture and mild, comforting flavor that wasn't challenging or strange, and adults appreciated how filling and warming it was, despite containing only the most basic ingredients every household kept on hand during the Depression when money was scarce, and meals needed to be simple, fast, and cheap. Tomato gravy brought bright color and tangy flavor to Depression tables when Grandma wanted something different and more interesting than the usual brown meat gravy everyone ate constantly day after day. She started by heating 2 tablespoons of bacon grease or butter in a skillet over medium heat until it melted completely and started to shimmer on the surface. She whisked in 2 tablespoons of flour, stirring constantly for about a minute to create a roux that would thicken the gravy properly and cook out the raw flour taste. Instead of adding milk like regular white gravy that everyone made weekly, she slowly poured in about 2 cups of canned tomato juice or crushed tomatoes with all their liquid, whisking constantly and vigorously to prevent lumps from forming in the mixture and ruining the smooth texture. The gravy bubbled and thickened within about 3 minutes as the flour absorbed the tomato liquid, turning a beautiful reddish-orange color that looked cheerful and appetizing on the plate. She seasoned it with salt to bring out the tomato flavor, black pepper for warmth, and a pinch of sugar to balance the tomato's natural acidity and bring out its natural sweetness without making it taste like dessert. Some grandmas added a splash of cream or milk at the very end to make it richer and softer in color, creating a pink gravy that children found less intimidating and more appealing than pure red tomato gravy. She served this hot gravy ladled generously over biscuits, toast, or boiled potatoes, creating a complete meal that was filling and satisfying despite containing no meat at all and costing almost nothing to prepare. The tomato flavor was bright, tangy, and completely different from the heavy brown gravies families ate most days, making it feel like something special and different, even though it cost almost nothing to prepare and used ingredients most families already had. This proved that by changing just one ingredient, swapping tomato juice for milk, Grandma could create variety in the family's diet without spending extra money or using ingredients they didn't already have, sitting in the pantry waiting to be used. Fried Spam and eggs became a reliable breakfast when Grandma needed protein that would last through morning work without costing much money or requiring trips to the butcher for fresh meat. Ox Spam was introduced in 1937 and quickly became a Depression favorite because a single can cost only pennies, required no refrigeration until opened, and contained enough meat to feed a family for 2 separate meals if stretched properly. Grandma sliced the Spam into 1/4-inch thick slabs, creating pieces that would hold together during frying without falling apart or becoming mushy and unappetizing in the pan. She heated a small amount of bacon grease or butter in a cast-iron skillet over medium-high heat, then laid the Spam slices carefully in the hot pan without crowding them so each piece would develop a proper crust. They fried for about 2 minutes per side until the edges became crispy and browned beautifully, developing a caramelized crust that added wonderful flavor and textural contrast. The outside turned golden and slightly crunchy, while the inside stayed tender, moist, and salty with that distinctive Spam flavor families came to love. She pushed the Spam slices to the side of the skillet and cracked 2 or 3 eggs directly into the same pan, letting them fry in the flavorful fat left behind by the meat, which added extra taste. The eggs cooked quickly, about 3 minutes, until the whites set completely, but the yolks remained soft and runny in the center, perfect for dipping bread. She served everything together on a plate with a slice of toasted bread for sopping up the runny yolks and making sure nothing was wasted, creating a complete breakfast that was filling and deeply satisfying. These 25 quick meals show how Depression-era grandmas created hot, filling suppers in under 10 minutes using pantry staples and clever shortcuts. From creamed beef to fried Spam, each recipe fed families when time and money were scarce, proving that resourcefulness mattered more than fancy ingredients. Bread pudding, stovetop version, let Grandma turn stale bread into sweet dessert or filling breakfast without heating up the oven, which saved precious fuel costs during the Depression when every single penny mattered and families couldn't afford to waste wood or coal unnecessarily. She tore about 4 cups of stale bread into bite-sized pieces and placed them in a large mixing bowl, using bread that was too hard to eat plain, but still perfectly good for cooking and wouldn't be wasted. In a medium saucepan, she whisked together 2 cups of whole milk, 2 beaten eggs, 3 tablespoons of white sugar, a generous pinch of salt, and a splash of vanilla extract if she had any left in the pantry that particular week. She heated this custard mixture over medium heat, stirring constantly with a wooden spoon in circular motions until it was hot and steaming but not boiling, which would have scrambled the eggs into chunks and ruined the smooth, silky texture everyone wanted. She poured the hot custard over the torn bread pieces and let it sit for about 2 minutes so the bread could soak up all the liquid completely and become soft, custardy, and saturated throughout every piece. Then she transferred everything carefully to a large skillet that had been greased generously with butter to prevent sticking and burning, spreading it into an even layer about an inch thick across the entire bottom. She covered the skillet tightly with a heavy lid and cooked it over low heat for about 5 minutes, checking occasionally by lifting the edge gently with a spatula to make sure the bottom wasn't burning or sticking badly to the pan. The pudding set into a soft, custardy texture throughout, with a slightly firmer bottom that had developed a hint of golden crust and light caramelization that added flavor. She served it warm, scooping generous portions into bowls and drizzling with dark molasses, maple syrup, or just a sprinkle of extra sugar on top, depending on what sweeteners were available in the pantry. Sometimes she added a handful of plump raisins to the custard before pouring it over the bread, giving little bursts of concentrated sweetness throughout every bite that children loved. Bean sandwich might sound strange and unappetizing today, but during the Depression, it became a filling lunch that cost almost nothing and could be prepared in minutes without cooking or heating anything on the stove. Grandma opened a can of pork and beans, or red kidney beans, and drained most of the liquid off carefully, leaving just enough to keep the beans moist and spreadable without making the bread soggy and falling apart. She mashed the beans roughly with a fork right in the can or in a small bowl, creating a chunky paste that would spread easily on bread without individual beans rolling off the edges and making a mess. She spread this mashed bean mixture thickly on slices of white bread, sometimes adding a thin layer of butter first, to keep the bread from getting soggy and to add richness and flavor that made the sandwich more appealing. If she had an onion available, she sliced it paper thin and laid a few rings on top of the beans for extra flavor, crunch, and sharpness that cut through the mild, creamy beans perfectly. Some grandmas added a spoonful of ketchup or yellow mustard to the mashed beans before spreading, giving them tangy flavor that made the sandwich more interesting and less bland and boring to eat. She topped it with another slice of bread and cut the sandwich in half diagonally, creating a portable lunch that could be wrapped tightly in wax paper and carried to work or school without falling apart during the journey. The beans provided substantial protein and fiber that kept hunger away for hours without needing expensive meat, and the bread added starch for quick energy to fuel work. This sandwich proved that meat wasn't necessary for a filling, satisfying lunch. Beans alone could be just as satisfying when prepared properly and seasoned well with simple additions like onion and mustard. Children sometimes refused to eat bean sandwiches because they seemed too plain, strange, or embarrassing compared to what wealthier classmates brought to school in their lunch pails, but families who ate them regularly knew they were nutritious, filling, and economical, even if they weren't fancy, exciting, or something to brag about to friends. The entire sandwich took less than 5 minutes to assemble from start to finish, and canned beans lasted for months in the pantry without refrigeration, making this a reliable meal when fresh food wasn't available or affordable during Depression years when money was always tight and work was scarce for most families struggling to survive. Fried cabbage and onions became a quick side dish or light supper when Grandma needed vegetables that cooked fast and tasted good without requiring many ingredients beyond what grew in the backyard garden during summer and fall months when cabbage heads were plentiful and cheap. She sliced half a head of green cabbage into thin ribbons using a sharp kitchen knife, creating strips that would cook quickly and evenly in the hot pan without some pieces staying raw and crunchy, while others burned black and bitter on the edges. She diced a medium yellow onion into small pieces that would soften and sweeten during the cooking process, adding depth of flavor and aromatic sweetness to the simple vegetable dish that would otherwise taste plain. She heated 2 tablespoons of bacon grease. She diced a medium yellow onion into small pieces that would soften and sweeten during the cooking process, adding depth of flavor and aromatic sweetness to the simple vegetable dish that would otherwise taste plain. She heated 2 tablespoons of bacon grease or butter in a large cast-iron skillet over medium-high heat until it melted completely and started to shimmer and ripple on the surface, indicating it was hot enough for proper frying and caramelization to occur. She added the diced onion pieces first, cooking them for about 2 minutes, while stirring occasionally with a wooden spoon until they started to soften and turn translucent and glassy, releasing their natural sweetness and creating an aromatic base for the cabbage that would be added next. Then she added all the sliced cabbage at once in a big pile that filled the skillet, stirring everything together thoroughly and tossing it so the cabbage would wilt evenly and cook at the same rate without some pieces burning, while others stayed crunchy and raw in the center underneath. Or she cooked it for about 6 to 7 minutes total cooking time, stirring frequently with a wooden spoon and flipping the cabbage from bottom to top repeatedly, until the cabbage softened completely and became tender, and the edges started to brown and caramelize slightly in spots, developing deeper, richer, more complex sweet flavor throughout the entire dish. She seasoned everything generously with plenty of salt and lots of black pepper for warmth and spice and bite, and sometimes added a good splash of white or apple cider vinegar at the very end for tangy brightness and acidity that cut through the richness of the bacon grease and balanced the natural sweetness of the caramelized onions and softened cabbage perfectly without overwhelming the dish. The finished dish was tender, sweet, deeply flavorful and satisfying, with caramelized onions distributed evenly throughout and cabbage that had lost its raw bitterness and strong sulfur smell and become mellow, pleasant, and easy to eat. Cornmeal porridge provided hot, filling breakfast that cost almost nothing and kept everyone satisfied and full until lunch, without needing expensive eggs, fresh milk, butter, or other fresh ingredients from the grocery store that many families couldn't afford regularly during Depression years. And Grandma brought 3 cups of cold water to a rolling boil in a medium-sized saucepan over high heat on the wood stove, adding a generous pinch of salt to season the porridge properly from the very beginning so the final flavor would be balanced and pleasant to eat. She slowly poured in 1 cup of yellow or white cornmeal in a steady stream, while whisking constantly and vigorously with her other hand to prevent lumps from forming in the mixture and creating an unpleasant, grainy, chunky texture that would ruin the smooth consistency everyone preferred. The cornmeal thickened almost immediately as it hit the boiling water, absorbing liquid rapidly and swelling up quickly into a thick, bubbling mass that required constant attention. And she reduced the heat to low immediately to prevent scorching and burning on the bottom of the pan, which would ruin the entire batch. She served it hot in bowls, with each family member adding their own toppings based on personal preference and what was available in the pantry that particular morning: a pat of butter that melted into golden pools on top, a drizzle of dark molasses or maple syrup for sweetness and richness. A generous sprinkle of white or brown sugar for simple sweetness, or even a splash of milk if any was left over after making morning coffee for the adults. Some families preferred to eat it savory instead of sweet, adding just butter, extra salt, and black pepper, and treating it exactly like Southern grits rather than sweet breakfast cereal that children typically preferred in the morning. The porridge was creamy, filling, deeply comforting and satisfying, with a slightly grainy texture that was pleasant and substantial rather than completely smooth like oatmeal or farina. It stuck to ribs for many hours, providing steady energy through hard morning work and physical labor without the heaviness or richness of fried eggs and fatty meat that some people found too filling and heavy first thing in the morning before work. Sugar toast with tea became the simplest possible meal when Grandma had absolutely nothing else in the house and needed something quick to quiet hungry stomachs before everyone left for work or school in the early morning hours. She toasted slices of white bread until they were warm and lightly golden brown on both sides, filling the entire kitchen with that comforting, nostalgic smell of toasted bread that made everyone feel a little better and more hopeful even on the hardest days. While the bread was still hot from the toaster or skillet, she spread it with a thin but generous layer of butter or lard if butter wasn't available that week, letting it melt completely into the bread and soak into every pore and air pocket throughout the slice. Then she sprinkled white or brown sugar generously and evenly across the entire buttered surface, covering it completely so every single bite would be sweet and satisfying, sometimes adding a tiny pinch of ground cinnamon if the spice tin wasn't completely empty that week, and someone felt like being a little fancy. The sugar stuck firmly to the melted butter, creating a simple, sweet topping that satisfied sugar cravings and provided quick energy without needing eggs, milk, or any baking or complicated preparation that would take precious time in the morning. She served this with cups of hot tea, usually weak tea made from leaves that had already been used once or twice before, to stretch them further and make the precious tea tin last longer through the entire month. Families sometimes dunked the sugar toast into the hot tea, softening it and creating a warm, sweet, comforting bite that felt soothing and satisfying, even though it was desperately simple and not particularly nutritious by any reasonable standard. Children ate this for breakfast when there was absolutely nothing else available in the cupboard, or as an after-school snack when they came home hungry and tired, and the pantry was nearly empty until payday at the end of the long week. The entire preparation took less than 5 minutes from start to finish, and every ingredient was something even the poorest households kept on hand as absolute basic staples. It wasn't fancy or particularly nutritious by modern nutritional standards, and doctors today would never recommend it as a balanced meal, but it filled stomachs temporarily and provided a brief moment of sweetness and comfort during difficult times when every single penny mattered desperately, and going hungry was a very real possibility for struggling families. These 30 Depression-era meals prove that grandmas were absolute geniuses who knew how to feed families fast without wasting a single minute, penny, or ingredient during the hardest times America ever faced. From sick day toast to sugar toast, with tea, every recipe delivered hot, filling food in under 10 minutes using nothing but basic pantry staples that even the poorest households kept on hand. Grandmas didn't need fancy equipment, expensive ingredients, or complicated techniques. They needed love, resourcefulness, and the determination to keep their families fed, no matter how tight money became or how empty the cupboards looked at the end of the week. These meals weren't just about survival, they were about dignity, comfort, and making sure no one went to bed hungry, even when times were desperately hard. Grandmas turned stale bread into pudding, stretched a few ounces of meat to feed 6 people, and created complete meals from beans, cornmeal, and vegetables grown in the backyard. They proved that fast cooking and smart shortcuts could produce satisfying food that kept families strong, hopeful, and together around the table even during the Great Depression, when millions struggled just to survive each day. Pick one recipe from this list right now, not tomorrow, not next week, but today, and cook it in your kitchen. Feel what Grandma felt when she made something from nothing. Taste what your ancestors ate when times were hard but love was abundant. Share this article with your family so these recipes don't disappear forever into history. Comment below and tell us which depression meal your grandmother made for you as a child, because these stories and memories need to be preserved before they're lost forever. Cook it, share it, remember it. Honor the women who fed America through its darkest days with nothing but 10 minutes and genius hearts.